The Alpha's Hidden Passion, Forbidden Werewolf Romance Audiobook. Chapter 1, The Silent Howl. The night was heavy with silence, yet the Alpha could not sleep. His body lay still, but his mind was restless, caught in the grip of a sound no one else could hear. It was not the wind, nor the rustle of the forest. It was a howl, low and mournful, echoing from somewhere deep inside his chest. He rose from his bed of furs, bare feet pressing against the cold stone floor of the Alpha's chamber. The moonlight spilled through the carved window, painting silver scars across his skin. His wolf stirred restlessly beneath the surface, claws itching, heart pounding. This howl was not from his pack. It was not from any wolf he knew. It was his own, a phantom cry that clawed at his soul, demanding release. The Alpha stepped outside, the night air biting against his skin. The forest stretched endlessly, shadows shifting like living things. He closed his eyes, listening. The howl came again, louder this time, vibrating through his bones. It was not a warning, it was not a call to hunt, it was desire, raw, forbidden, and dangerous. He clenched his fists, fighting the urge to answer. If his pack heard him howl tonight, they would know something was wrong. An Alpha was meant to be unshakable, a pillar of strength. But this sound was a fracture in his armor, a secret he could not share. And then, in the silence that followed, he saw her. Not in flesh, not in shadow, but in vision. A woman standing beneath the crimson moon, her eyes glowing like embers, her presence pulling at him with irresistible force. She was not of his pack, she was not meant to be his, yet the howl inside him belonged to her. The Alpha staggered back, breath ragged, heart racing. He knew what this meant. His wolf had chosen a mate, one forbidden by every law of the pack. The howl rose again, louder, hungrier, echoing through the night. And though he tried to silence it, he knew the truth. This was only the beginning. Chapter 2, The Broken Ritual. The night of the ritual arrived with a weight heavier than any storm. The pack gathered in the clearing, a circle of wolves and humans alike, their eyes reflecting the firelight that danced in the center. This was no ordinary gathering. It was the renewal, the sacred ceremony that bound the Alpha's strength to the pack for another season. Tradition demanded perfection. The Alpha's voice was meant to be steady, his movements flawless, his dominance unquestioned. But tonight something was wrong. The Alpha stood tall at the edge of the fire, his cloak of black fur draped across his shoulders, his gaze sweeping over his wolves. He raised his hand to begin the chant, the words carved into memory since childhood. Yet as the first syllable left his lips, his throat tightened. The phantom howl from the night before echoed inside him, drowning out the ritual words. His voice cracked, faltered, and for the first time in living memory, the Alpha stumbled. A ripple of unease spread through the circle. Wolves exchanged glances, ears twitching, tails stiffening. The elders frowned, their wrinkled faces shadowed by firelight. The Beta, standing at the Alpha's right hand, narrowed his eyes, suspicion flickering like a spark. The Alpha forced himself onward, gripping the ceremonial staff until his knuckles whitened. He spoke the words again, louder this time, but the rhythm was broken. The chant, meant to flow like the river, now stuttered like a dying flame. The pack felt it, the fracture, the weakness. And then it happened. As the fire roared higher, the Alpha's wolf surged beneath his skin, clawing for release. His eyes flashed gold, but not the steady gold of dominance. They burned with crimson streaks, unnatural, forbidden. Gasps filled the clearing. The wolves stepped back, fear mingling with awe. This was not the Alpha they knew. This was something else. The ritual collapsed. The fire sputtered, the chant dissolved, and silence fell like a blade. The alpha lowered his staff, chest heaving, sweat dripping down his brow. He had failed. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then whispers began, soft at first, then louder, spreading like wildfire. The alpha faltered. The alpha is changing. The alpha hides something. The beta stepped forward, his voice sharp as steel. "What troubles you, alpha?" he asked, though the question was more accusation than concern. The alpha met his gaze but said nothing. How could he explain the howl that haunted him, the vision of a forbidden mate that burned in his mind? To speak it aloud would mean ruin. To remain silent meant suspicion. The pack waited, restless, their faith shaken. The ritual was broken, and with it, the alpha's unshakable image. As the fire dimmed, the phantom howl rose again inside him, louder than ever. He clenched his jaw, forcing it down, but he knew the truth. The pack had seen his weakness. And weakness, in the world of wolves, was blood in the water. Tonight, the alpha had not only broken the ritual, he had broken the illusion of perfection. And somewhere in the shadows, someone would use that fracture to tear him apart. Chapter 3: The Stranger Within. The alpha stood alone at the edge of the forest, the night pressing against him like a living thing. His breath came heavy, his chest tight, and beneath his skin his wolf stirred with restless energy. The pack had seen him falter, but what they had not seen was the change that now consumed him. His reflection in the river was no longer the same. The eyes staring back glowed with streaks of crimson, his jaw sharper, his form heavier with power that felt unfamiliar. He leaned closer, the water rippling, distorting the image until it seemed another wolf stared back. A stranger, wild and untamed. The alpha clenched his fists, forcing control, but the stranger within clawed harder, demanding release. His body trembled, his bones ached, and for a moment he thought he might split apart. The howl rose again, not from the forest, not from the pack, but from inside him, a sound that shook the trees and silenced the night. The wolves nearby froze, ears pricked, eyes wide. They had heard it, they had felt it, but none could place its source. The alpha lowered his head, sweat dripping, his heart pounding like war drums. He knew the pack would question him, but he could not answer. The stranger within was no longer silent. It had a voice, a presence, a power that refused to be hidden. And as the moonlight carved across his skin, the alpha realized he was no longer alone in his own body. The forest seemed to lean closer, shadows stretching, the air thick with tension. The alpha straightened, his breath steadying, his eyes burning with unnatural fire. He turned back toward the pack's camp, each step heavy, each heartbeat echoing with the rhythm of something new, something dangerous. The wolves would see him differently now. They would sense it in his stride, in the way the air shifted around him. The alpha was changing, and with every breath, the stranger within grew stronger. Chapter 4: The Forbidden Vision. The forest was alive with whispers that night. The wind carried scents of pine and earth, the river hummed with its eternal song, and the moon hung swollen and crimson above the treetops. The alpha moved through the shadows, his step silent, his senses sharpened. Every sound, every flicker of movement seemed amplified, as though the world itself was holding its breath. He had not slept since the ritual. The phantom howl gnawed at him, louder now, relentless. It drove him into the woods, away from the pack's watchful eyes, away from the beta's suspicion. He needed silence, but the silence only deepened the sound inside him. And then, beneath the blood-red moon, the vision came. She appeared at the edge of the clearing, her figure cloaked in silver light. Her hair shimmered like midnight silk. Her eyes burned with a fire that was not human, not wolf, but something in between. She did not move, yet the Alpha felt her presence pressing against him, pulling at him, commanding him. His breath caught. His wolf surged forward, claws scraping against the inside of his skin, desperate to reach her. He staggered, his chest tight, his heart pounding like a drum of war. He knew her, though he had never seen her before. She was the one. But she was wrong. Everything about her was wrong. Her scent carried the mark of the rival pack, the sworn enemies of his bloodline. Her aura was forbidden, dangerous, a fire that could burn his world to ash. Still, he could not look away. The vision grew sharper. He saw her lips part, though no sound escaped. He saw her hand lift, reaching for him, though the distance between them was endless. He felt her heartbeat echo inside his chest, as if their souls were already entwined. The Alpha fell to his knees, the weight of it crushing him. His wolf howled inside, a sound that tore through his body but never reached the air. He wanted to deny it, to fight it, but the bond was undeniable. The forbidden mate was real, and she was his. The forest trembled. The crimson moon pulsed, and in that moment, the Alpha understood. This was not a dream. This was a vision of destiny. He rose slowly, his eyes burning with unnatural fire, his body trembling with the force of desire and dread. The vision faded, dissolving into shadows, but the bond remained. He could feel her still, lingering in his veins, etched into his soul. The Alpha turned back toward the pack's camp, his steps heavy, his mind racing. He knew what this meant. If the pack discovered the truth, they would see him not as their leader, but as a traitor. The howl rose again, louder than ever, echoing through the night. And though he tried to silence it, he knew the truth. The forbidden vision was only the beginning. Chapter 5. The First Betrayal. The clearing was quiet after the broken ritual, but silence in a pack was never peace. It was tension, heavy and suffocating, pressing down on every wolf like a storm waiting to break. The Alpha walked among his people with his head high, his stride steady, but he could feel it. The eyes that lingered too long, the whispers that died when he drew near. One wolf in particular watched him closer than the rest. A hunter named Kyle, loyal once, but restless now. Kyle had always admired the Alpha's strength, had followed him into battle without hesitation. But tonight, Kyle's gaze carried doubt. He had seen the tremor in the Alpha's hand, the crimson flicker in his eyes. He had heard the phantom howl that seemed to come from nowhere. And Kyle, unlike the others, believed he knew the truth. The Alpha was hiding something. Kyle did not confront him. Not yet. Instead, he whispered. First to his brother, then to his circle of hunters, then to anyone who would listen in the shadows. The Alpha faltered. The Alpha is changing. The Alpha is not what he was. The words spread like smoke, curling into every ear, poisoning trust. The Alpha sensed it. He felt the shift in the air, the way wolves avoided his gaze, the way loyalty bent under the weight of suspicion. He stood taller, spoke louder, commanded with the same authority as always, but the fracture was there, invisible yet undeniable. That night, as the pack slept, Kyle slipped into the forest. He followed the trail of the Alpha's scent, moving silently, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. He reached the river where the Alpha had stood before, and there, in the reflection of the crimson moon, Kyle saw it, the same unnatural glow in the Alpha's eyes, the same restless energy that did not belong to the leader he once knew. Kyle's breath caught. He turned back, his mind racing. He would not keep this to himself. The pack deserved to know. The Alpha was changing, and change meant danger. By dawn, the whispers had become a murmur. By dusk, the murmur had become a voice, and though the Alpha still held his staff, still commanded his wolves, he knew the truth. Betrayal had already begun. Chapter 6. Echoes of the Heart. The night was restless, the forest alive with whispers that seemed to follow the Alpha wherever he walked. Every rustle of leaves, every shift of shadow carried the weight of unseen eyes. Yet beneath the tension another sound stirred, softer, deeper, resonating not in the air but in his chest. It was not the phantom howl this time. It was a heartbeat. He stopped at the riverbank, the same place where his reflection had betrayed him before. The water shimmered under the moonlight, rippling as though stirred by invisible hands. He leaned closer, and there she was again, not in flesh, not in shadow, but in vision. Her eyes glowed like embers, her presence pressing against him with unbearable intensity. The Alpha's wolf surged forward, claws scraping at the inside of his skin, desperate to reach her. His breath caught, his chest tightened, and for a moment he thought he might collapse beneath the weight of it. Yet the vision did not fade. Instead, it grew sharper, clearer, until he could feel her heartbeat echo inside his own. He staggered back, clutching his chest. The rhythm was undeniable. Two hearts beating as one, bound by something older than law, stronger than tradition. He tried to silence it, to push it away, but the sound only grew louder, filling him with a warmth that was both terrifying and intoxicating. The forest seemed to bend around him, the air thick with her presence. He closed his eyes, and in that darkness he saw her, standing beneath the crimson moon, her hand reaching for him, her lips parting as though to speak. No words came, but he felt them all the same. "Come to me." The Alpha's knees buckled, his body trembling. He wanted to deny it, to fight it, but the bond was undeniable. His wolf howled inside, a sound that tore through him but never reached the air. He pressed his hand against the earth, grounding himself, but the heartbeat followed, relentless. When he opened his eyes, the vision was gone. The river was still, the forest silent, yet the echo remained, pulsing through his veins, etched into his soul. He knew then that this was no illusion. This was the bond of mates, forbidden, dangerous, and unbreakable. The Alpha rose slowly, his breath ragged, his eyes burning with unnatural fire. He turned back toward the camp, each step heavy, each heartbeat echoing with hers. He knew the pack would sense it soon. They would feel the change in him, the rhythm that no Alpha should carry. And somewhere in the shadows, someone was already listening. Chapter 7. The Rival's Warning. The forest was restless, its silence broken by the crunch of footsteps that did not belong to the pack. The Alpha stood at the edge of the clearing, his senses sharpened, his wolf bristling beneath his skin. He had felt the presence long before it revealed itself, a shadow moving with purpose, carrying the scent of blood and ash. From the darkness emerged a figure cloaked in the colors of the rival pack. His eyes gleamed with defiance, his posture rigid, his voice low but steady. "Your strength falters, Alpha," he said, each word dripping with venom. "The forest carries whispers of your weakness, and weakness invites ruin." The Alpha's jaw tightened, his gaze burning gold. He did not answer at once. The rival's words were not careless, they were calculated, meant to wound, meant to strike at the fracture already spreading within his pack. The messenger stepped closer, unafraid. "The blood moon rises soon. When it does, your secret will no longer be yours alone. We know what stirs inside you. We know who calls to you." His lips curled into a smile that was more threat than amusement. "And when the truth is revealed, your wolves will turn on you. They will tear you apart before we ever need to lift a claw." The Alpha's wolf surged forward, claws itching, heart pounding. He wanted to strike, to silence the messenger, but something held him back. The rival's confidence was not born of arrogance. It was born of knowledge. knowledge of the forbidden bond that haunted him. The pack gathered behind him, restless, their eyes flicking between Alpha and intruder. They could not hear the truth beneath the words, but they felt the tension, the danger. The beta stepped forward, his suspicion sharpening, his gaze narrowing on the Alpha as though the rival's warning had confirmed what he already feared. The Alpha raised his hand, silencing the pack. His voice was low, steady, commanding. "Leave this forest," he said. "Carry your poison back to your master. Tell him the Alpha stands unbroken." The messenger tilted his head, his smile widening. "Unbroken?" he whispered. "We shall see." And then he was gone, swallowed by the shadows, leaving only the echo of his warning behind. The Alpha stood still, his chest heavy, his mind racing. The rival's words lingered like claws against his skin. "We know who calls to you." The pack dispersed slowly, murmurs rising, suspicion thickening. The beta lingered, his eyes locked on the Alpha, his silence louder than any accusation. The Alpha turned away, his breath ragged, his heart echoing with hers. The rival's warning was clear, the secret was no longer safe, the bond was no longer hidden, and the blood moon would reveal everything. Chapter 8. Moonlit Confession. The forest was drenched in silver light, the moon hanging heavy above the treetops. The Alpha moved through the shadows, his steps slow, deliberate, as though each one carried the weight of destiny. The phantom howl had quieted, replaced now by something deeper, something more dangerous, the echo of her heartbeat inside his chest. He reached the clearing where the river bent like a blade of glass, its surface shimmering beneath the moon. The air was thick, charged, alive with a presence he could no longer deny. And then, she was there. Not a vision this time, not a dream, but real. Her figure cloaked in moonlight, her eyes burning with the same fire that haunted him. The Alpha froze, his breath caught, his wolf surging forward with a hunger that nearly broke him. For a moment neither spoke. The silence between them was louder than any words, filled with the weight of everything forbidden. Finally she stepped closer, her voice soft but steady. "You feel it too," she whispered. "The bond, the pull, you cannot hide it." The Alpha's jaw tightened, his chest heaving. He wanted to deny it, to push her away, but the truth was carved into his very soul. "It should not be," he said, his voice low, rough. "You are of them. I am of us. This bond is death." Her eyes glimmered, defiant. "Or it is life. You know it as well as I do. The moon chose us. Not your laws, not your pack. Us." The Alpha's wolf clawed at him, desperate to close the distance, to claim what was his. He stepped forward, his hand trembling as it reached for hers. When their fingers touched, the world seemed to shatter. The river stilled, the wind hushed, the forest bowed to the power of their bond. Heat surged through him, raw and consuming. Her heartbeat echoed inside his chest, louder now, undeniable. He felt her strength, her fear, her desire, all of it merging with his own. For the first time, the Alpha understood the truth. This was not weakness, this was power. But power came with a price. From the shadows, unseen eyes watched. The beta lingered at the edge of the clearing, his gaze sharp, his suspicion confirmed. He saw the Alpha's hand in hers, saw the fire in their eyes, and he knew. The whispers of betrayal had found their proof. The Alpha pulled back suddenly, his breath ragged, his heart pounding. "This cannot be seen," he said, his voice trembling with urgency. "If they know, if they see, it will destroy us both." She held his gaze, her voice steady. "Then let them try." The moonlight burned brighter, the bond sealed in silence. And though the Alpha turned away, his hand still shook with the memory of her touch. The confession had been made, the truth spoken aloud. There was no turning back. Chapter 9. The Beta's Doubt. The camp was restless. Wolves moved in silence, their eyes sharp, their ears twitching at every sound. The broken ritual, the rival's warning, the whispers of hunters, all of it had left the pack unsettled, and at the center of it all stood the beta, his gaze fixed on the alpha with a weight that felt heavier than loyalty. The beta had served faithfully for years, his strength second only to the alpha's, his loyalty unquestioned. But now, doubt gnawed at him like teeth in the dark. He had seen the alpha falter, he had seen the crimson flicker in his eyes, and last night, hidden in the shadows, he had seen something more. The alpha's hand entwined with hers, the forbidden mate cloaked in moonlight. He said nothing, but silence was its own weapon. His eyes lingered too long, his questions cut too sharp, his presence pressed against the alpha like a blade at his back. The pack noticed. They saw the beta's hesitation, felt the fracture widening between leader and second. The alpha sensed it too. Every command he gave was met with a pause, every order weighed against suspicion. The beta obeyed, but his obedience carried no trust. It was duty, cold and brittle, ready to shatter. That night, the beta stood alone at the edge of the forest, his thoughts heavy. He remembered the alpha's strength, the battles they had fought side by side, the victories that had bound them together. But he also remembered the vision he had witnessed, the forbidden bond, the betrayal of law. His jaw tightened. Could he remain silent? Could he protect a leader who had already broken the pack's sacred rules? Or was it his duty to act, to expose the truth before the alpha's secret destroyed them all? The wind howled through the trees, carrying the phantom sound that haunted the alpha. The beta closed his eyes, listening. He heard it too now, faint, distant, but real. The howl was not of the pack. It was something else, something dangerous. When he opened his eyes, his decision was not yet made. But the doubt was no longer silent. It had a voice, a weight, a power that would not be ignored. The beta turned back toward the camp, his gaze hard, his steps heavy. The alpha's secret was no longer his alone. The beta carried it too, and with each passing night, the burden grew heavier. Chapter 10. The Crimson Omen. The night came heavy with silence, but the silence was not peace. It was anticipation, thick and suffocating, pressing against the forest like a storm waiting to break. The alpha stood at the edge of the clearing, his eyes fixed on the sky. The moon was rising, swollen and red, bleeding its light across the treetops. The pack gathered behind him, restless. They felt it too. The shift in the air, the weight of something unnatural. The elders whispered of omens, of curses, of blood spilled long ago. The hunters sharpened their blades, their eyes darting nervously. Even the beta, silent and watchful, seemed unsettled, though his suspicion burned brighter than fear. The alpha's chest tightened. The crimson glow reflected in his eyes, streaking gold with fire that did not belong. His wolf stirred violently, claws scraping, heart pounding. He could feel her, the forbidden mate, closer than ever, her heartbeat echoing inside his own. The bond pulsed with the rhythm of the blood moon, undeniable, unbreakable. The fire in the clearing sputtered, sparks rising into the night, shadows stretched long, twisting into shapes that seemed alive. The pack shifted uneasily, their instincts screaming that something was wrong. The alpha raised his staff, his voice steady, commanding. "Stand firm," he said. "The moon tests us. We will not break." But even as he spoke, the omen revealed itself. The crimson moon flared brighter and the howl rose, not from the pack, not from the forest, but from within him. It tore through the clearing, raw and primal, shaking the trees, silencing every voice. The wolves froze, their eyes wide, their bodies trembling. They had heard it before, faint and distant. But tonight, it was undeniable. The howl belonged to the alpha, and it was not the howl of their leader, it was something else. The beta stepped forward, his gaze sharp, his voice low. "What is this, Alpha?" he demanded. "What stirs inside you?" The Alpha's jaw tightened, his breath ragged. He could not answer. The truth burned too close, too dangerous. He lowered his staff, his eyes glowing crimson, his body trembling with the force of the bond. The pack murmured, fear spreading like wildfire. The elders exchanged glances, their faces pale. The hunters shifted, their hands tightening on their weapons. The beta's suspicion hardened into certainty. And then, in the distance, a shadow moved. She appeared at the edge of the forest, her figure cloaked in silver light, her eyes burning with the same fire that haunted him, the forbidden mate, the omen made flesh. The Alpha's heart thundered, his wolf howling inside. The pack gasped, their voices rising in shock and fear. The crimson moon pulsed, the bond blazing brighter than ever. The Alpha knew then that the omen was clear. The blood moon had revealed his secret. The forbidden bond was no longer hidden, and the pack would never see him the same again. Chapter 11. The Pack Fractures. The clearing still trembled from the howl that had torn through it. The crimson moon hung above, bleeding its light across the wolves, and silence pressed down like a weight too heavy to bear. The Alpha stood at the center, his staff lowered, his chest heaving, his eyes burning with unnatural fire. Around him, the pack shifted uneasily, their faith shaken, their loyalty cracking. Whispers spread like wildfire. The Alpha is changing. The Alpha hides something. The Alpha is no longer ours. The words carried from wolf to wolf, growing louder, sharper, until they became a chorus of doubt. The elders gathered, their faces pale, their voices hushed. They spoke of omens, of curses, of laws broken. The hunters muttered among themselves, their hands tightening on their weapons, their eyes darting nervously toward their leader. Even the youngest wolves, once filled with awe, now looked upon the Alpha with fear. The beta stepped forward, his gaze sharp, his voice steady. "The pack deserves truth," he said, his words cutting through the murmurs. "What stirs inside you, Alpha? What bond ties you to the crimson moon?" The Alpha's jaw tightened, his breath ragged. He wanted to speak, to silence the doubt, but the words would not come. The truth burned too close, too dangerous. He lowered his gaze, and in that silence, the fracture widened. Kael, the hunter who had whispered betrayal, stepped into the circle. His voice rose, bold and defiant. "We saw her," he said, "the shadow at the edge of the forest. The rival's blood burns in her eyes. And you," his finger pointed at the Alpha, trembling with fury, "you reached for her. You chose her." Gasps filled the clearing. The pack recoiled, their voices rising in shock and anger. The beta's eyes narrowed, his suspicion hardened into certainty. The elders shook their heads, their voices trembling with fear. The Alpha raised his staff, his voice booming, commanding. "Enough!" he roared. The wolves fell silent, but the silence was no longer obedience, it was defiance, heavy and dangerous. The crimson moon pulsed above, its light bleeding across the clearing. The Alpha's wolf surged inside him, desperate to fight, desperate to claim, but he held it back, his body trembling with the effort. He looked into the eyes of his pack and saw what he had feared most, doubt. The pack was no longer whole. Loyalty had splintered, trust had shattered. Some still stood with him, their eyes filled with faith. Others turned away, their hearts poisoned by betrayal. And in the shadows, the beta watched, silent, calculating, his doubt now a weapon waiting to strike. The Alpha lowered his staff, his chest heavy, his heart echoing with hers. He knew then that the fracture could not be mended with words. The pack had seen too much, felt too much. The bond was no longer hidden, and the wolves would never see him the same again. The pack had fractured. And in the world of wolves, fractures meant war. Chapter 12. The Hunter's Snare. The fracture within the pack had not yet healed when the forest itself turned against them. The wolves moved uneasily, their loyalty splintered, their whispers sharp. The alpha felt it in every step, every glance, the weight of suspicion pressing down on him. But what none of them saw was the danger waiting beyond the trees. The hunters had come. They were men hardened by blood and steel, cloaked in shadows, their weapons forged to pierce even the strongest wolf hide. They had watched the pack for weeks, waiting for weakness, waiting for division. And now, with the alpha's secret exposed and the pack's unity shattered, the moment had arrived. The first trap was silent, a snare hidden beneath the leaves, its iron teeth snapping shut around the leg of a young wolf. The howl of pain tore through the clearing, sending the pack into chaos. The alpha spun, his eyes blazing, his wolf surging forward. He saw the hunters step from the shadows, their blades gleaming, their eyes cold. The pack scattered, fear rising like smoke. Some fought, claws flashing, teeth bared. Others fled, their loyalty broken, their courage gone. The alpha roared, his voice shaking the trees, commanding order, but the fracture was too deep. The wolves no longer moved as one. The beta fought at his side, his strikes sharp, his movements precise. Yet even as he battled, his gaze flicked toward the alpha, suspicion burning beneath the surface. Every falter, every crimson flicker in the alpha's eyes was another reason to doubt. The hunters pressed forward, their snares snapping, their blades cutting. The forest echoed with cries of pain, with the clash of steel and claw. The alpha's wolf surged, his strength burning brighter than ever, his movements faster, sharper. He tore through the hunters with fury, his body trembling with unnatural power. But the pack saw it. They saw the crimson fire in his eyes, the unnatural glow that marked him as different, and though he fought for them, though he bled for them, their fear grew. The battle raged until the hunters fell back, their traps broken, their numbers thinned. The forest fell silent once more, the air heavy with blood and smoke. The alpha stood at the center, his chest heaving, his eyes burning. Around him the pack gathered, wounded, shaken, divided. The beta stepped forward, his voice low, sharp. "You fought with power, not of us," he said. "You fought with something else, something dangerous." The alpha met his gaze, his jaw tight, his breath ragged. He said nothing. The silence was answer enough. The hunters had struck, but the true wound was within. The pack had seen their alpha's power, and instead of faith, it had bred fear. The snare had not only caught their wolves, it had caught their trust. Chapter 13. The Mate Revealed. The forest was heavy with silence after the hunters' retreat. Smoke lingered in the air, mingling with the scent of blood and fear. The pack huddled together, wounded and shaken, their eyes darting toward the alpha with unease. He stood at the center, his chest heaving, his eyes burning crimson beneath the fading glow of the moon. And then, from the shadows, she stepped forward, the forbidden mate. Her presence silenced the clearing. Every wolf turned, their bodies stiffening, their instincts screaming. She moved with grace, her figure cloaked in silver light, her eyes locked on the alpha. The bond pulsed between them, raw and undeniable, filling the air with a tension that no wolf could ignore. The alpha's breath caught. His wolf surged forward, claws scraping at the inside of his skin, desperate to claim her. He had seen her in visions, felt her heartbeat echo inside his chest, but now she was real. Flesh, blood, and fire. The pack recoiled, their voices rising in shock. "She is of them. She is the rival. She is forbidden." The whispers grew louder, sharper, until they became a chorus of fear and anger. The beta stepped forward, his gaze sharp, his voice cutting. "You bring her here," he demanded. "You stand before your pack with the enemy at your side." The alpha's jaw tightened, his chest heavy. He wanted to speak, to silence the doubt, but the bond burned too strong. He reached for her hand, and when their fingers touched, the world seemed to shatter. The forest stilled, the fire dimmed, and the crimson glow flared brighter. The wolves gasped, their eyes wide, their bodies trembling. They felt it, the bond, the power, the truth. The alpha was tied to her, bound by something older than law, stronger than tradition. The beta's voice rose, sharp and furious. "This is betrayal," he said. "This is the end of our pack." The alpha turned, his eyes blazing, his voice steady. "No," he said. "This is the beginning." The pack erupted, some howling in defiance, others bowing in awe. The fracture widened, loyalty splintered, trust shattered. The forbidden mate stood at his side, her gaze fierce, her presence undeniable. The alpha knew then that the truth could no longer be hidden. The mate was revealed, the bond was real, and the war for the pack's soul had begun. Chapter 14, The Beta's Challenge. The pack gathered beneath the fading crimson moon, their voices sharp, their bodies restless. The forbidden mate stood at the alpha's side, her presence undeniable, her bond with him blazing like fire. The wolves shifted uneasily, torn between awe and fear, loyalty and betrayal, and at the center of it all, the beta stepped forward. His eyes burned with suspicion, his jaw tight, his voice steady. "Enough," he said, his words cutting through the murmurs. "We have followed you through battles, through blood, through storms. But tonight we see the truth. You are no longer ours, you are bound to her, to the enemy, and that bond will destroy us." The alpha's chest tightened, his wolf surging inside him. He raised his staff, his voice commanding. "I am still your alpha. I bleed for this pack. I fight for this pack. No bond changes that." The beta's lips curled into a grim smile. "Then prove it." The pack fell silent, their eyes wide, their breath caught. They knew what those words meant. A challenge, a test of strength, of dominance, of truth. The beta had spoken, and tradition demanded the alpha answer. The alpha's heart thundered, his wolf clawing at him, desperate to fight. He stepped forward, his eyes blazing gold, streaked with crimson. The beta mirrored him, his body tense, his gaze sharp, his loyalty shattered. The circle formed, wolves pressed closer, their howls rising, their voices echoing through the forest. The forbidden mate stood at the edge, her eyes locked on the alpha, her heartbeat echoing inside his chest. He felt her strength, her fire, her fear, all of it merging with his own. The beta lunged first, his claws flashing, his strike sharp and precise. The alpha met him head on, their bodies colliding with the force of thunder. The ground shook, the trees trembled, the pack roared. The battle had begun. Chapter 15, Clash of Wolves. The forest held its breath. The crimson moon loomed above, swollen and merciless, casting its blood-red glow across the clearing. The pack circled tightly, their eyes wide, their bodies tense, their howls silenced by anticipation. They knew what was coming. Tradition demanded it. The beta had spoken and the alpha had answered. Tonight, dominance would be decided not by words, but by claws, by blood, by fate. The alpha stood tall, his chest heaving, his staff lowered. His eyes burned gold, streaked with crimson fire, his wolf surging inside him with restless fury. At his side, the forbidden mate lingered at the edge of the circle. Her gaze locked on him, her heartbeat echoing inside his chest. He felt her strength, her fear, her defiance, all of it merging with his own. The beta stepped forward, his body rigid, his gaze sharp. He was no ordinary wolf. He had fought beside the alpha in countless battles, had bled for the pack, had earned his place as second. But tonight, he was more than beta. Tonight, he was challenger, rival, executioner of tradition. His eyes gleamed with cold certainty. His voice cut through the silence. "You are no longer ours," he said. "Tonight, I take what you cannot protect." The alpha's jaw tightened. His wolf clawed at him, desperate to fight, desperate to claim. He raised his voice, steady, commanding, "I am still your alpha, and I will prove it." The circle erupted in howls, the pack's voices rising into the night, echoing through the forest. The ground trembled beneath their cries, the air thick with tension. The alpha and beta lunged. Their bodies collided with the force of thunder. Claws flashed, teeth bared, muscles straining. The earth shook beneath their weight. The trees bent beneath their fury. The pack roared, their voices blending with the clash, their eyes locked on the battle that would decide their future. The beta struck first, his claws slicing across the alpha's shoulder, blood spraying into the night. The alpha staggered, his wolf howling inside, but he did not fall. He surged forward, his strike sharper, faster, fueled by the bond that burned within him. His claws tore across the beta's chest, his roar shaking the clearing. The battle raged, each strike heavier than the last, each howl louder, each moment more brutal. The alpha fought with power not of the pack, his movements faster, his strength burning brighter. The crimson fire in his eyes blazed, unnatural, undeniable. The beta fought with precision, his strikes calculated, his fury sharpened by betrayal. The pack watched, torn between awe and fear. Some howled for the alpha, their voices filled with loyalty. Others cried for the beta, their hearts poisoned by doubt. The fracture widened, the pack splintered, their unity shattered. The alpha's wolf surged, claws flashing, teeth sinking deep. The beta staggered, his breath ragged, his body trembling. But he did not fall. He lunged again, his strike desperate, his howl raw. Their bodies collided once more, the force shaking the earth, the crimson moon blazing above. The forbidden mate cried out, her voice piercing the chaos. The alpha heard her, felt her heartbeat echo inside his chest, fueling his strength. He roared, his claws tearing through the beta's defenses, his strike final, his dominance undeniable. The beta fell to his knees, his chest heaving, his eyes burning with defiance even in defeat. The pack froze, their voices silenced, their eyes locked on the alpha. He stood tall, his body trembling, his eyes blazing crimson, his wolf howling in triumph. The battle was over. The alpha had won. But victory was not peace. The pack saw the fire in his eyes, the unnatural glow that marked him as different. They bowed, some in loyalty, some in fear, some in defiance. The fracture remained, deeper than ever. The alpha stood victorious, but the war for the pack's soul had only just begun. Chapter 16. Shadows of Victory. The clearing was silent after the clash, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of shock, of fear, of awe. The crimson moon still bled across the treetops, its glow painting the wolves in shades of fire and shadow. The alpha stood tall at the center, his chest heaving, his claws dripping, his eyes blazing with unnatural crimson light. The beta knelt before him, defeated but unbroken, his gaze sharp even in surrender. The pack bowed, some in loyalty, some in fear, some in defiance. Their howls had died, their voices silenced, but their hearts were restless. They had seen their alpha fight with power beyond their understanding, strength that did not belong to the laws of wolves. And though he had won, though he had proven his dominance, the victory carried shadows. The elders whispered among themselves, their faces pale, their voices trembling. This is not the alpha we knew. This is something else, something dangerous. The hunters' wounds still lingered, their snares still fresh in memory, and now the pack feared that the greatest danger was not outside, But within, the alpha felt it. He stood tall, his wolf howling inside, but his chest was heavy, his breath ragged. He looked at his pack and saw the fracture widening. He had won the battle, but he had not won their trust. His victory was a crown of fire burning brighter than ever but threatening to consume him. At the edge of the clearing, the forbidden mate stepped forward. Her presence silenced the whispers, her eyes locked on the alpha, her heartbeat echoing inside his chest. He felt her strength, her defiance, her fire, all of it merging with his own. She was his anchor, his bond, his truth. But to the pack, she was the shadow of betrayal. The beta rose slowly, his body trembling, his eyes sharp. He bowed his head, but his voice carried defiance. "You are Alpha," he said, his words steady, "but you are not ours. Not anymore." The pack gasped, their voices rising, their bodies shifting uneasily. The Alpha's jaw tightened, his wolf clawing at him, desperate to strike. But he held it back, his body trembling with the effort. He raised his staff, his voice booming, commanding, "I am still your Alpha. I bleed for this pack. I fight for this pack, and I will lead you through the storm." The wolves bowed, some willingly, others reluctantly, but the fracture remained, deeper than ever. The Alpha stood victorious, but his victory was shadowed by fear, by doubt, by betrayal. The crimson moon pulsed above, its light fading slowly, its omen lingering. The Alpha turned away, his chest heavy, his heart echoing with hers. He knew then that victory was not enough. Shadows had risen and they would not be silenced. Chapter 17, The Storm Within. The forest was quiet, but the quiet was not peace. It was the silence before thunder, the stillness before a storm. The Alpha stood alone at the edge of the clearing, his chest heavy, his breath ragged, his eyes burning with the crimson fire that refused to fade. Victory had been claimed, but it tasted of ash. The pack lingered behind him, fractured and restless. Some bowed in loyalty, their eyes filled with faith. Others turned away, their hearts poisoned by fear. The beta's defiance still echoed in the clearing, his words sharp, his doubt unbroken. "You are Alpha, but you are not ours." The Alpha's wolf clawed at him, restless, furious, desperate to fight. But it was not the beta he fought now, it was himself. The bond burned inside him, the forbidden mate's heartbeat echoing through his veins, filling him with strength and fire. Yet that same fire was the reason his pack recoiled, the reason their trust had splintered. He closed his eyes, and in the darkness he saw her. The forbidden mate, cloaked in silver light, her gaze fierce, her hand reaching for his. She was his anchor, his truth, his destiny, but she was also the storm. With her came power, but with her came ruin. The Alpha staggered, his knees buckling, his claws scraping against the earth. His wolf howled inside, a sound that tore through him but never reached the air. He pressed his hand against the ground, grounding himself, but the heartbeat followed, relentless, undeniable. The pack watched from the shadows, their whispers sharp, their fear growing. The elders spoke of curses, of omens, of laws broken. The hunters' snares had wounded their bodies, but the Alpha's bond had wounded their souls. They no longer knew if he was their protector or their doom. The beta stepped forward, his gaze sharp, his voice low. "You fight yourself," he said, "and while you fight the pack breaks. You cannot lead us through the storm if you are the storm." The Alpha's eyes blazed, his breath ragged. He wanted to strike, to silence the doubt, but he held back. His wolf clawed at him, desperate to fight, but he knew the truth. The beta's words were not lies. They were the reflection of his own fear. The crimson moon pulsed above, its light fading slowly, its omen lingering. The Alpha rose, his chest heavy, his eyes burning. He turned toward his pack, his voice steady, commanding. "I will not break," he said. "The storm is mine to carry, and I will lead you through it." The wolves bowed, some willingly, others reluctantly. But the fracture remained deeper than ever. The alpha stood tall, his wolf howling inside, his heart echoing with hers. He knew then that the storm was not outside, it was within, and it would not be silenced. Chapter 18. The Whisper of Betrayal. The forest no longer felt like home. The air was thick with suspicion, the silence heavy with unspoken words. The alpha walked among his wolves, his chest heavy, his eyes burning with the crimson fire that refused to fade. He had won the clash, but victory had not healed the fracture. It had deepened it. The beta lingered in the shadows, his gaze sharp, his voice silent. But silence was its own weapon. He spoke not to the alpha but to the pack, in whispers, in glances, in doubts planted like seeds in the soil of fear. He is not ours, he is bound to her, he is dangerous. The wolves listened. Some resisted, their loyalty unbroken. Others faltered, their faith shaken. The whispers spread like wildfire, carried from ear to ear, heart to heart, until they became a chorus of doubt. The elders gathered in secret, their voices hushed, their faces pale. They spoke of omens, of curses, of laws broken. They remembered the crimson moon, the howl that had torn through the clearing, the forbidden mate revealed in silver light. They remembered the alpha's eyes, burning with unnatural fire, and they wondered if the beta was right. The hunter's snares had wounded their bodies, but the alpha's bond had wounded their souls. They no longer knew if he was their protector or their doom. The beta's whispers grew sharper, bolder. He spoke of tradition, of law, of loyalty. He spoke of the alpha's betrayal, of the danger of the forbidden bond. He spoke of the storm that would consume them all if they did not act. And the pack listened. The alpha felt it. He stood tall, his wolf howling inside, but his chest was heavy, his breath ragged. He looked at his pack and saw the fracture widening. He saw the whispers in their eyes, the doubt in their hearts. He knew then that the storm was no longer within him alone. It had spread to the pack. At the edge of the clearing, the forbidden mate stepped forward. Her presence silenced the whispers, her eyes locked on the alpha, her heartbeat echoing inside his chest. He felt her strength, her defiance, her fire, all of it merging with his own. She was his anchor, his truth, his destiny, but to the pack, she was the shadow of betrayal. The beta's voice rose, sharp and steady. "He is alpha," he said, "but he is no longer ours. If we do not act, we will fall." The pack froze, their eyes wide, their bodies trembling. The fracture had become a wound, and the wound was bleeding. The alpha stood tall, his wolf howling inside, his heart echoing with hers. He knew then that betrayal was no longer a whisper, it was a storm, and it was coming. Chapter 19. The Breaking Point. The forest no longer carried silence. It carried tension, sharp, heavy, alive. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of twig was drowned beneath the murmurs of wolves whose loyalty had splintered. The alpha stood at the center of the clearing, his chest heavy, his eyes burning with crimson fire. His wolf surged inside him, restless, furious, desperate to fight. But tonight, the battle was not against hunters or rivals. Tonight, it was against his own pack. The whispers had grown louder, sharper, bolder. The beta's voice had carried them, planting seeds of doubt that now bloomed into defiance. "He is not ours. He is bound to her. He is dangerous." The words echoed through the clearing, carried from wolf to wolf until they became a chorus of rebellion. The elders stepped forward, their faces pale, their voices trembling. "The laws are broken," they said. "The bond is forbidden. The alpha has betrayed us." The hunter's snares had wounded their bodies, but the alpha's bond had wounded their souls. They no longer knew if he was protector or doom. The beta's voice rose, sharp and steady. "You are Alpha," he said, his gaze locked on the leader. "But you are no longer ours. Tonight, we decide. Tonight, the pack chooses." The wolves howled, their voices rising into the night, echoing through the forest. Some howled for the Alpha, their loyalty unbroken, their faith burning bright. Others howled for the Beta, their hearts poisoned by fear, their courage sharpened by betrayal. The clearing shook beneath their cries, the fracture widening, the storm breaking. The forbidden mate stepped forward, her presence silencing the chaos, her eyes locked on the Alpha, her heartbeat echoing inside his chest. He felt her strength, her defiance, her fire, all of it merging with his own. She was his anchor, his truth, his destiny. But to the pack, she was the shadow of ruin. The Alpha raised his staff, his voice booming, commanding, "I bleed for this pack, I fight for this pack, I will not break." The Beta's claws flashed, his voice sharp, "Then prove it, not with words, with blood." The pack roared, their voices shaking the trees, their bodies trembling with anticipation. The storm had broken, the whispers had become cries, the cries had become rebellion. The Alpha's wolf surged, his claws scraping against the earth, his eyes blazing crimson. He stepped forward, his chest heavy, his breath ragged. The Beta mirrored him, his body tense, his gaze sharp, his loyalty shattered. The circle formed. Wolves pressed closer, their howls rising, their voices echoing through the forest. The crimson moon pulsed above, its light bleeding across the clearing. The Alpha and Beta stood face to face, their bodies trembling, their wolves howling inside. The breaking point had come, and the pack would never be the same again. Chapter 20: War of Wolves. The forest was no longer silent, it was alive with fury. The crimson moon hung heavy above, bleeding its light across the clearing, painting the wolves in shades of fire and shadow. The pack had fractured, and now the fracture had become war. The Alpha stood at the center, his chest heaving, his eyes blazing with crimson fire. His wolf surged inside him, restless, furious, desperate to fight. At his side, the forbidden mate lingered, her presence undeniable, her heartbeat echoing inside his chest. She was his anchor, his truth, his destiny, but to the pack she was the shadow of ruin. The Beta's voice rose, sharp and steady. "Tonight we decide," he said. "Tonight the pack chooses." The wolves howled, their voices rising into the night, echoing through the forest. Some howled for the Alpha, their loyalty unbroken, their faith burning bright. Others howled for the Beta, their hearts poisoned by fear, their courage sharpened by betrayal. The clearing shook beneath their cries, the storm breaking, the war beginning. The Alpha raised his staff, his voice booming, commanding, "I bleed for this pack, I fight for this pack, I will not break." The Beta lunged, his claws flashing, his strike sharp. The Alpha met him head on, their bodies colliding with the force of thunder. The ground shook, the trees trembled, the pack roared. The battle was chaos. Wolves clashed against wolves, claws flashing, teeth sinking deep. The clearing echoed with cries of pain, with the clash of strength and fury. The Alpha fought with power not of the pack, his movements faster, his strength burning brighter. The crimson fire in his eyes blazed, unnatural, undeniable. The Beta fought with precision, his strikes calculated, his fury sharpened by betrayal. The pack split, loyalty shattered. Brothers fought against brothers, sisters against sisters. Blood stained the earth, the crimson moon blazing above. The forbidden mate cried out, her voice piercing the chaos, her eyes locked on the Alpha. He heard her, felt her heartbeat echo inside his chest, fueling his strength. The Alpha roared, his claws tearing through the Beta's defenses, his strike final, his dominance undeniable. but the war did not end. The pack remained divided, their howls rising, their voices echoing through the forest. The elders cried out, their voices trembling, "This is not our way, this is ruin." The Alpha stood tall, his chest heavy, his eyes blazing. He looked at his pack and saw the fracture widening, the war consuming them. He knew then that victory was not enough. The war of wolves had begun, and it would not end until the storm was silenced. Chapter 21. Blood and Ashes. The clearing was no longer a place of unity, it was a graveyard. Blood stained the earth, ashes clung to the air, and the cries of wolves still echoed faintly in the night. The war of wolves had ended, but its scars were carved deep into the pack's soul. The Alpha stood at the center, his chest heavy, his eyes burning with crimson fire. His wolf howled inside him, restless, furious, desperate to fight again. But there was no battle left, only ruin. Bodies lay scattered across the clearing, brothers against brothers, sisters against sisters. Wolves, who had once hunted together, now lay broken, their loyalty shattered, their blood mingling in the soil. The crimson moon loomed above, merciless, its omen fulfilled. The pack gathered, wounded and weary, their eyes filled with fear and doubt. Some bowed to the Alpha, their loyalty unbroken, their faith burning bright. Others turned away, their hearts poisoned by betrayal, their courage sharpened by defiance. The fracture had become a wound, and the wound bled still. The elders wept, their voices trembling. "This is not our way," they said. "This is ruin, this is blood and ashes." The Beta stood apart, his body trembling, his eyes sharp. Though defeated, his defiance had not died. He spoke in whispers, his voice carrying through the clearing. "He is Alpha," he said, "but he is not ours. He is bound to her, and with her we will fall." The forbidden mate stepped forward, her presence silencing the whispers. Her eyes locked on the Alpha, her heartbeat echoing inside his chest. She was his anchor, his truth, his destiny, but to the pack, she was the shadow of ruin. The Alpha raised his staff, his voice booming, commanding, "I bleed for this pack, I fight for this pack, I will not break." But the wolves did not howl. Their silence was heavier than any roar. Their silence was betrayal. The Alpha stood tall, his chest heavy, his eyes burning. He knew then that victory was not enough. The war had left blood and ashes, and from them shadows had risen, shadows that would not be silenced. Chapter 22. The Silent Divide. The forest was heavy with silence, but it was not peace. It was the silence of wolves who no longer howled together, the silence of loyalty fractured, the silence of betrayal waiting to strike. The crimson moon had faded, but its omen lingered in every shadow, in every heartbeat. The Alpha stood tall at the center of the clearing, his chest heavy, his eyes burning with crimson fire. His wolf surged inside him, restless, furious, desperate to fight. But tonight there was no battle. Tonight there was silence, and silence was more dangerous than war. The pack had split. On one side, wolves bowed to the Alpha, their loyalty unbroken, their faith burning bright. They saw his strength, his fire, his bond, and they believed. On the other side, wolves turned away, their hearts poisoned by fear, their courage sharpened by betrayal. They saw his crimson eyes, his forbidden mate, and they recoiled. The elders lingered between them, their voices hushed, their faces pale. They spoke of omens, of curses, of laws broken. They remembered the blood and ashes, the war that had torn the pack apart, and they feared that silence was only the beginning. The Beta moved among the wolves, his voice low, his words sharp. He did not roar, he did not howl, he whispered, and his whispers carried farther than any cry. "He is not ours, he is bound to her. He is dangerous." The Alpha felt it. He stood tall, his wolf howling inside, but his chest was heavy, his breath ragged. He looked at his pack and saw the divide hardening. He saw silence becoming defiance, whispers becoming rebellion. He knew then that the storm was no longer within him alone. It had spread to the pack. At the edge of the clearing, the forbidden mate stepped forward. Her presence silenced the whispers, her eyes locked on the alpha, her heartbeat echoing inside his chest. She was his anchor, his truth, his destiny. But to the pack she was the shadow of ruin. The alpha raised his staff, his voice booming, commanding, "I bleed for this pack, I fight for this pack, I will not break." But the wolves did not howl. Their silence was heavier than any roar. Their silence was betrayal. The alpha stood tall, his chest heavy, his eyes burning. He knew then that silence was not peace. Silence was war. And the divide would not be silenced. Chapter 23. The Forbidden Flame. The forest was restless, alive with whispers that cut sharper than claws. The pack lingered in silence, divided, their loyalty fractured, their faith splintered. The crimson moon had faded, but its omen lingered in every shadow, in every heartbeat. The alpha stood tall at the center of the clearing, his chest heavy, his eyes burning with crimson fire. His wolf surged inside him, restless, furious, desperate to fight. But tonight, the battle was not against hunters or rivals. Tonight, it was against tradition itself. At the edge of the clearing, she stepped forward, the forbidden mate. Her presence silenced the whispers. Her figure was cloaked in silver light, her eyes fierce, her heartbeat echoing inside the alpha's chest. She was his anchor, his truth, his destiny. But to the pack, she was the shadow of ruin. The elders recoiled, their voices trembling. "This bond is forbidden," they said. "It will destroy us." The beta's gaze sharpened, his voice low, his words cutting. "She is the flame that will consume us. If you choose her, you choose ruin." The alpha's jaw tightened, his chest heavy. He stepped forward, his eyes locked on hers, his wolf howling inside. He reached for her hand, and when their fingers touched, the world seemed to shatter. The forest stilled, the fire dimmed, and the bond blazed brighter than ever. The pack gasped, their voices rising in shock and fear. They felt it, the bond, the power, the truth. It was undeniable, unbreakable, unstoppable. The alpha was tied to her, bound by something older than law, stronger than tradition. The crimson fire in his eyes flared, his voice booming, commanding, "I will not hide, I will not break, she is mine, and together we are flame." The wolves howled, some in awe, others in defiance. The fracture widened, the silence shattered, the storm ignited, the forbidden flame burned, fierce and unstoppable, consuming the clearing, consuming the pack. The alpha stood tall, his mate at his side, his wolf howling in triumph. He knew then that the bond was no longer shadow, it was fire, and fire could not be silenced. Chapter 24. The Last Hunt. The forest was restless, alive with shadows that moved like predators. The pack lingered in silence, divided, their loyalty fractured, their faith splintered. The forbidden flame had been revealed, burning bright, consuming tradition, igniting destiny. But while the wolves fought among themselves, another enemy had been watching. The hunters had returned. They came cloaked in darkness, their blades gleaming, their snares sharpened. They had seen the fracture, the silence, the rebellion. They had smelled the blood and ashes, had heard the whispers of betrayal, and now they struck. The first trap was swift. A snare snapped shut around the leg of a young wolf, its howl tearing through the clearing. The pack erupted in chaos, their voices rising, their bodies scattering. Some fought, claws flashing, teeth bared. Others fled, their loyalty broken, their courage gone. The alpha surged forward, his wolf blazing inside him, his eyes burning crimson. He tore through the hunters with fury, his movements faster, sharper, fueled by the forbidden flame. His mate stood at his side, her presence fierce, her heartbeat echoing inside his chest. Together, they fought as one. Flame and fire, bond and destiny. But the pack saw it. They saw the crimson fire in his eyes, the unnatural glow that marked him as different. They saw the forbidden mate fighting at his side, her strikes sharp, her defiance undeniable. And though they fought for survival, though they bled for each other, fear grew. The beta's voice rose above the chaos, sharp and steady. "He is not ours," he cried. "He fights with power not of us. He fights with her, and with her we will fall." The wolves faltered, their strikes weakening, their courage fading. The hunters pressed forward, their snares snapping, their blades cutting. The forest echoed with cries of pain, with the clash of steel and claw. The alpha roared, his voice shaking the trees, commanding order. "Stand firm," he cried. "Fight! The storm is ours to carry." Some wolves rallied, their howls rising, their claws flashing. Others turned away, their hearts poisoned by fear, their loyalty shattered. The fracture widened, the silence deepened, the storm consumed them. The battle raged until the hunters fell back, their traps broken, their numbers thinned. The forest fell silent once more, the air heavy with blood and smoke. The alpha stood at the center, his chest heaving, his eyes burning. His mate stood at his side, her gaze fierce, her presence undeniable. But the pack did not howl. Their silence was heavier than any roar. Their silence was betrayal. The alpha knew then that the last hunt had not been against the hunters, it had been against his own pack. And the final storm was yet to come. Chapter 25. The Crimson Dawn. The night had been long, filled with blood, betrayal, and fire. The forest bore scars of war. Ashes clung to the air. The earth was stained with crimson, and silence pressed heavy upon the wolves. But as the horizon shifted, the first light of dawn broke through the trees. It was not golden, it was crimson. The alpha stood tall at the center of the clearing, his chest heavy, his eyes burning with fire that refused to fade. His wolf surged inside him, restless, furious, desperate to claim victory. At his side, the forbidden mate lingered, her presence fierce, her heartbeat echoing inside his chest. Together, they were flame and storm, bond and destiny. The pack gathered, fractured and weary. Some bowed in loyalty, their faith unbroken, their voices trembling with awe. Others turned away, their hearts poisoned by fear, their courage sharpened by betrayal. The beta stood among them, his gaze sharp, his defiance unbroken. He had lost the clash, but his whispers had not died. The elders stepped forward, their voices trembling. "The laws are broken," they said. "The bond is forbidden. The alpha has betrayed us." The alpha raised his staff, his voice booming, commanding. "I bleed for this pack. I fight for this pack. I will not break. The storm is mine to carry, and I will lead you through it." The crimson dawn blazed across the clearing, its light fierce, its fire undeniable. The wolves froze, their eyes wide, their bodies trembling. They felt it, the bond, the power, the truth. It was not shadow, it was flame, and flame could not be silenced. The beta's voice rose, sharp and steady. "He is alpha," he said, "but he is not ours. If we follow him, we follow ruin." The alpha's wolf surged, his claws scraping against the earth, his eyes blazing crimson. He stepped forward, his chest heavy, his breath ragged. His mate stood at his side, her gaze fierce, her presence undeniable. Together, they faced the pack, their bond burning brighter than ever. The wolves howled, their voices rising into the dawn. Some howled in loyalty, their faith unbroken. Others howled in defiance, their rebellion sharpened. The clearing shook beneath their cries, the fracture widening, the storm breaking. The Alpha roared, his voice shaking the trees, his wolf howling in triumph. "This is not the end," he cried. "This is the beginning. The crimson dawn has risen, and with it, so shall we." The pack froze, their voices silenced, their eyes locked on him. They saw the fire in his eyes, the bond at his side, the storm within his chest. They saw not ruin but destiny. The crimson dawn blazed brighter, its light consuming the forest, its fire igniting the pack. The Alpha stood tall, his mate at his side, his wolf howling in triumph. He knew then that the storm had not destroyed them, it had remade them. The pack would never be the same again, and the world of wolves had only just begun.